I'm going to be very transparent. I spent a lot of time second guessing and contemplating what I would actually talk about that would be of value. I was international president in 2010-11, and that's a long time ago. So can I bring things that are fresh and bright from the board? Of course not. Can I bring bright, fresh experiences that I've had? Hopefully so. But I also wanted to share some of the experiences that I've had in my 40 years of Toastmastering and why I'm still a Toastmaster who does Toastmastering and who is actively engaged in the learning program still and loving every minute of it. First of all, some of you know that I'm an ontological coach. What does ontological mean? Well, it fits with the rest of my philosophy in life. Ontological means holistically, the whole beingness, so that when we look at people, when we're coaching them, or I work with people that I'm coaching with, I'm looking at their spiritual well-being, their physical well-being, their emotional and social well-being. And there's many areas of well-being, but I thought, well, that's a good place to look tonight. And so I've chosen to actually look at Toastmasters and the lessons I've learned through those lenses, because by taking the Toastmasters learnings and taking it out to my whole life at a holistic perspective, I've gained a lot. Now, I'm curious if any of you want to raise your hand and share with me, thinking back to that very first time. And I know for some of you, that's a long time ago. Some of you, that will be a shorter time ago. But what was the real reason that brought you to Toastmasters? So for me, while you're thinking of yours, for me, it was because I had no voice. I was afraid to walk into a room where there were people. I wanted to be invisible. I know, hard to imagine now, but that's why I ended up in Toastmasters, and it started changing my life. What about somebody else? What brought you? What was the precipitating event that brought you quickly? Anybody want to raise their hand before I call you out? I know enough of you to call you out.
Lorraine had a hand. Oh, sorry. Lorraine had a hand up.
I joined because I had a voice, and I had a car accident, and I lost everything that I did, but I lost my confidence. And I joined to be invisible. I didn't want to speak, but I just wanted to go and listen to people. And it didn't stay like that, but that's why I joined.
Fantastic. And the fact that we didn't stay like that, we didn't stay invisible. Yes, I thought maybe I could hang out in the back also. But yes, wonderful. So I can't see hands when they go up. So if people will please speak up. Or
David Phillips has his hand up.
Okay, David. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening. I first joined with two simple, straightforward reasons. I wanted to become a better presenter and speaker, and I wanted to have extend my social network.
Okay. Great. Thank you, David, for sharing.
And I also saw James Finnegan's hand up.
Okay, James.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Pat. I was curious. And that was, I'd heard so much about Toastmasters, and what I heard was wrong.
Okay, I hope that was a good thing. You're still here.
Yes, can't get rid of me that easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I know, and thank you each one for sharing, what I know is that often what brought us to Toastmasters isn't what keeps us here. But I'm looking at specifically leadership. And I want to think about that for a few minutes, because what I hear is that when we're starting to look around Toastmasters, and people often say, oh, we recruit leaders. I would like to back out of that statement, and I would like to say we recruit members and we build leaders if they're interested in being leaders. But not everybody joins us wants to be a leader. And so one of my things looking at people who take on leadership is, why me? Why me? Why would I be the leader? And for you to ask yourself, why me? Why would I be the leader? One of the things that I've noticed over many years is that some people join Toastmasters to get a designation. I know you've probably all met those people. And I look at some of them and I do have some judgment. I'll be transparent about it. When somebody comes up to me and says, I've got 15 DTMs, and I'll go, I'd be very interested in you telling me what you did differently when you did your 15th DTM than when you did your 5th one. And how have you grown? Or like some of the people that go through Toastmasters, and again, people come for different reasons. And so I don't want to judge that. Some people check the boxes. For me, it wasn't about checking boxes. I actually didn't care if I got any designations. I've got 4 DTMs in 40 years. That's pretty poor performance if you're counting DTMs. But my motivation was different. Not right or wrong, it's just different. Mine was to learn and to integrate. Because remember what I said, when I walked in, I couldn't talk to anybody. I was terrified to walk into a room where there were people. And there are a number of reasons for that I'm not going to share with you here tonight. But that's where I was at the age that I was. And it was very debilitating. And I knew it. So somehow I knew that there was a brain up here, but it couldn't put thoughts out. It couldn't build confidence. And I thought, I'm just going to try. Somebody suggested I go to Toastmasters, and I went. So when I look back, just look back on my experience in Toastmasters, the positions I've held, and what I've learned, I want to say that I started with listening skills, thinking skills, some speaking skills. I discovered innovation. I discovered accountability, which I love. I discovered resilience and built resilience through the years of working the program, being on club executive, being on district teams, being on the board, being on executive committee. You build resistance. I built a huge curiosity about learning about all kinds of topics that I'd never heard of before, about different people, about cultures, about different parts of the world. How people learn differently. I learned persistence. I learned and developed self-awareness. Somehow confidence sprung out through all these lessons and programs that we delivered and speeches that we delivered, evaluations that I delivered, club president role, and the self-esteem to know that I was capable and worthy of doing that role. I discovered flexibility in my mind, my thoughts, my capabilities. And that was a tough one for me because I wanted to be perfect. And I learned that if I let go of the need for perfection, I could be very flexible and have a lot of fun with it. I developed emotional intelligence and saw it develop around me in this program. I enjoyed teamwork with people I liked, people I didn't like so much, but I learned to respect. And it helped me as a team worker and a team leader throughout my life. I grew patience in this program working this program, working on club teams, working on the district team. And I built tolerance. That there were many ways to get to Dublin from where I was. But there was never just one way. I learned acceptance, different ideas, different ways of doing things, different lifestyles, different views of the world, just by shaking hands in Toastmasters, or in some cases, not shaking their hand. I learned guts, to have guts. And I use that word purposefully because that's what it felt like to me at first when I started being courageous and brave and believing in myself. I felt gutsy. I feel like I learned to be more discerning, I should say, to be more collaborative. I certainly learned how to negotiate and bring positivity to discussions when I went out to meet with corporate leaders. So I sit back and I go, well, why me? Why would I take on a role? Or maybe you ask yourself, why would I take on another leadership role? While I think of all these just first blush things that I learned, traits that I've developed in Toastmasters through the program, it makes me grateful that I decided that I wasn't going to tick the boxes, but I was going to take the program and all the people and experiences that came in it, and I was going to integrate them into my life to take them away. When I look at Toastmasters learning from a holistic perspective, as I mentioned, I want to look at it from 4 dimensions today. I want to look at it from spiritual wellness. And you say, spiritual wellness, what does that have to do with Toastmasters? Well, when I looked up spiritual wellness, it states that it's the force that drives us to make sacrifices for others, our nation, and the greater good. It can come from our heritage, our experience within our community, influence of role models, or other sources of inspiration. Now that sounds like Toastmasters to me. When I think of my heritage, I hear my great Aunt Pearl, who was a delight in my life. And she said to me when I was very young, and this kept me out of trouble and still sits on my shoulders today. She said, Patsy, you'll always be known by the company you keep, so choose carefully. As a result, I was involved with people that were involved in education, music, theater, physical activities, track and field. I didn't want to hang with the bad kids because I didn't want to be known as a bad kid. And so it influenced my life to be curious, to seek education, and to seek role models. When I got into Toastmasters very early, and some of you have heard this story before, Joseph LaRiviere, a businessman in my hometown, greeted me that very first night I walked into that door into my Toastmasters meeting with a great big grin on his face, and in his French Canadian accent said, "Welcome to Toastmasters." And Joseph brought me into that meeting. I know as clear as I'm sitting here as that if Joseph wouldn't have had that smile on his face and been at that door, I would not have gone into that Toastmasters meeting. And so I have a great appreciation for all those pivotal times in our life where those decisions are made that can change the course of our lives. But as a result of integrating that lesson into my life, It's super important for me currently to be at the door when a member walks in, or a potential member walks in, a guest walks in, that I'm there with a smile on my face to say, welcome to Toastmasters. And I'm so grateful for Joseph and being that role model and guiding me in. The other thing that happened that's continually influences me is that they asked me that very first night to join their club. And I have had that practice for 40 years. A guest walks in, I said, I'd love to share an application with you if you're interested in membership in our club. I do not send them away without asking them to join us, because I wouldn't have come back. So while we can look at what we do and tick the box as the sergeant at arms in our club, do we integrate the learning in our lives? Do we build our spiritual wellness through that? When I look around and I think of Ted and the many hours of discussions we've had about policy and bylaws and the pros and cons of things in Toastmasters as we were going through leadership. As I was going through district leadership and Ted was my mentor, and we discussed, what about this? What about that? And each one of those discussions impacted my learning and my takeaways. I watched people. I decided who I would hang around with because it would make a difference. I also look at sources of inspiration, and I am influenced by a number of authors and speakers, not necessarily Toastmasters, but they feed me to learn and to help me be stronger as a leader when it comes to spirituality. And I believe that that spiritual well-being helps me in leading myself and any team that I'm involved with. It also impacts me from a spiritual perspective of how I entered for election. Because when I ran for office, whenever I did, I had the perspective that there's a door. I'm going to knock on the door. I'm going to prepare my best. And if that door opens, it's mine. And if the door doesn't open, then I really believe that there's something greater for me somewhere else, to check another door. Because at some level, we have to be in the right place at the right time with the right circumstances for things to work. So I'm grateful for all those role models, my great aunt, Ted, Joseph, those that encouraged me along the way, those members in my club who are an inspiration to me, those first timers when they come into the International Convention are an inspiration to me, how brave they are and how full of learning and curiosity they are. And we get to learn from them. So I ask you to think about your origin, your spiritual wellness when it comes to leadership, when you say yes or when you say no to a leadership opportunity. The second area of wellness is emotional wellness. And this is defined as building an awareness of and accepting one's feelings and moods. It includes finding ways to encourage positive thinking and acceptance of oneself. Wow, I have to say this was a really tough one for me. Positive thinking worked fairly well because I could listen to it. I meditated so I could be calm and I could feel in control. But acceptance of myself was a real growth opportunity. So let's be clear, as a leader or just as a member of Toastmasters, I started small. I was sergeant at arms of the Toastmasters Club, and then I was public relations. I started writing an article for our weekly newspaper that reported on what happened in our Toastmasters Club because, again, I didn't have to talk, but I could write and they would publish it. So I had a bit of a success. And then I was invited to be an area director. I thought, why me? What do I bring to be an area director? What would I actually bring? I'm shy. I don't know very much. I don't have good confidence. I don't have good self-esteem. How? And then I went, whoa, stop. You're in a learning program. That's what you're here to learn. This is where it begins, Pat, by saying yes, by getting your head right, getting your heart right, and saying yes. And I signed up to be an area director. And I loved it. I loved the learning that I had. It was tough. I had 4 clubs in my area. They were all over 2 hours drive away from me in one direction. And we had our monthly meetings in Winnipeg, which was 350 miles from where I lived. And every month we had a meeting in Winnipeg. As an area director, I was expected to attend. We did not have reimbursement in our district. So I, being a young mother and a wife, had to find the money to drive 350 miles one Friday a month to Winnipeg, stay in a hotel overnight to go to the training the next day, the meeting on Saturday, and then to drive home again out of my pocket. I loved it. I learned perseverance. I learned patience. I learned persistence. I learned determination. I learned how to give a good report when I got to that meeting. And I learned in front of the district leaders what they were willing to teach. And I saw leadership of all kinds, shapes, sizes, attitudes. And I just kept soaking it in. It helped me build my awareness of myself. It helped me build positive thinking. And eventually I found that I was able to say to myself, you did a good job. And that was that first step of acceptance of myself. Part of emotional wellness is also having something that you look forward to. And when I was an area director, I was looking forward to my clubs being better at the end of the year than they were at the beginning, just as the role says we're supposed to do. Work with those clubs to be successful. And that was a brilliant opportunity for me. Very challenging. I didn't have all the answers, but I also learned that in Toastmasters, while you're learning and you're an active learner, you don't have to know all the answers. That's why we're there, to learn how, to learn what, and just to keep going. So I kept going. And over the years, I feel like I've developed a positive attitude and that I've developed a good sense of myself. One of the tests of this was when I thought about running for district leadership. I'd been in Toastmasters about 15 years as a student before I decided that I would run for district leadership. I had changed districts in that interim period, and so it did take me for a while. But the first year I went to the district council meeting and I ran from the floor because I wasn't feeling confident enough to actually campaign and say, I want to be what was then what's now called the club growth director. I didn't feel that confidence and I was not elected. The fellow that was elected the next year did not go on to PQD. And so I thought, I'm sitting in the business meeting, and I thought, oh, well, I'll run then. So I again ran from the floor, stood up, nominated myself, and I was not elected. I went away knowing that until I believed in myself as a leader, and I believed in my capabilities, and I believed that I was worthy of this role, and that I was willing to do what it took to do this role, and I was willing to be vulnerable and say, I want this role, that I would not be elected. And so I went away to do other things in the district. I ran a conference, did a number of education presentations, stayed very involved. But the time came when my friend said, please run for the district office. And I said, I'll run next year. And it was an entirely different experience for me. I got a campaign manager. I knew I could do this role. I wanted it. I was vulnerable. I asked people to vote. I phoned people. I put myself out there, and I got elected. And it changed things for me to be that vulnerable and to get what I really worked towards. I learned a lot about it. And I've learned from there that I look at things and I ask that they unfold with ease and grace, that everything happen in my life with ease and grace. I don't force it to make it happen, but I'm willing to step up to a door, to knock on that door, and see if it opens with ease and grace for me. And if not, to have the fortitude, the insight, the self-awareness to say, there's something greater for me to do than this right now. The other thing that I've developed over the years in terms of the emotional wellness, I believe, is that sense of when I feel pulled to do something rather than pushed. And maybe you've had this experience when the district leadership team comes along and says, we need you to be whatever it is, division director. We need you to be area director. We're looking for club growth director. And you feel them pushing. What we need to do in our leadership growth, in my opinion, is to step back and say, do I feel pulled to do this? What will I get for my internal learning, my growth, if I do this in return for the time and the commitment I'm making? And if you feel pulled to do it, step boldly forward. If you feel pushed, maybe it's not the right time, the right place, the right circumstances for you. And maybe next year will be. So do what's right for you and think about the learning, but be in touch with what you're learning. The third area of well-being, wellness in terms of leadership is physical. Now, this might sound strange, but what I've really learned in leadership in many, many ways is that you have to be physically well, that we are holistic being. And if our body's not well, our brain doesn't function as well, and we don't have the energy to lead. It takes a lot of energy, and I take my hat off to all the current and past leaders for the leadership that you bring. It takes focus, it takes energy, it takes physical well-being. Even to run a campaign, the time, the commitment, the energy to eat well, make sure you got lots of ice cream in your diet for some of you, Rupa, to have whatever it takes that nourishes you, to keep you well and healthy, that you're active, that you care for yourself. I had a holistic health person in my life for a number of years, and he always said, if your body hurts, you're not using it enough. Our bodies were made to move. And I've really taken that to heart in my leadership. And I want to be physically active. I want to be able to walk out on a stage and feel comfortable physically as long as I can. And that requires that as a leader, we take care of ourselves, that we take time to have the quiet we need, that we take time to eat and exercise, rest, and have fun, play. A couple of years ago, I was going through a pretty stressful time and making a decision about my life. And I felt like I was really not having fun with the decision. And I invited some of my girlfriends out and I said, we're going to play today. And some of my girlfriends are very good at playing. And they said, what are we doing? I said, the first thing we're going to do is link arms downtown in the city. And we're going to sing and skip through the main street, singing songs like we did when we were girls. And so we locked arms and we skipped down the street of the city singing, hippity hop to the barber shop to get a stick of candy. And we went on and people stopped. And it was amazing how many people stopped and laughed, and some applauded us for the fun that we were having. It's really important, and it helps us build resilience to overcome fatigue, criticism, lack of sleep, and build ourselves strong mentally, physically, emotionally. So have fun, play. Social wellness is being cognizant of the impact you and your actions have on your community, the society, and nature. So we want to be aware all around us. We want to know what our impact is. When I was a brand new Toastmaster, one of my great lessons was by standing at an international convention. So I joined Toastmasters in '83. My very first international convention was in 1987. So I was a 4-year Toastmaster. I stood at that convention and I wasn't very strong personally, but I stood there and people walked by me and it was like nobody saw me. And I saw leaders that were wearing leader badges walk by, never acknowledge me. And I thought, that really hurts. I'm in this organization and they don't see me because I don't have the right badge on, or I'm not with the right people, or I'm not in the in crowd. And it influenced me as a leader. And my integration of that learning was that I don't want to walk by people at convention. I want to find time to meet you, to hear about your experiences, to hear about your life, where you live, the food you eat, the music you love, the experiences you've had as a leader. See, I believe from my place of origin that I'd be the same today as I was last year if it hadn't been for the stacks and stacks and stacks of books that I've read. The places I've visited this year, 9 countries this year, and the people I've met, like you. What I learned from each one of you when we have an opportunity to exchange ideas. And I look forward to seeing all of you in Nassau, perhaps, or maybe someday when I'm back in Ireland to meet you and visit. But there's many, many ways to expand. I grew up in a very multicultural small community where somebody said to me when I was a young adult, oh, so-and-so was Chinese. And I went, really? I had never registered that people were different nationalities. They were just our neighbors. They were Suji and they were Peter and they were Marcus, and it didn't matter. Our community was made up of people from all over the world. So we were all different. So that all seemed the same. And I'm grateful for that. So when I look at all the things that I've experienced in Toastmasters, from club president to international president, I don't think of it as ticking boxes. That's not what's important to me. And that's not why I'm a Toastmaster, still actively engaged, working, completing speeches, VP of membership of my club. It's because I've integrated what there is to learn, and I continue to be curious about the people, about the program, and what there is for us to learn. So I want to encourage you that as you consider stepping up to leadership, whatever role it is, whether it's in your club, your district, internationally, to look at yourself from that holistic perspective and look at your wellness. Are you balanced spiritually? Are you balanced emotionally, physically, and socially? See, leaders are surrounded by friends and people that support them. And we have to look after those people or they won't be there. When I was international president and I got elected and I came home and I phoned up my friends and we all went out for coffee and my girlfriends. And I said to them, I'm going to, for the most part, disappear for a year, but I need you to be here. I need you to be here in 1 year when I come back. Please be here. And let's make time in the interim when there's an opportunity. So we found the occasional time to go to a theater or a musical event or a walk or grab a coffee. But we need people around us to be as leaders so that we stay, that we're steady, that we keep our balance, and that we're allowed, or not allowed, but we're able through that balanced living to integrate the learning that comes our way. So when you think of your next leadership role, and you think of yourself as the leader stepping forward, what will it be that you want to learn? Don't cheat yourself and tick the box. Integrate the learning into your life and ask yourself each time those leadership roles come up, why me? And then say yes.